Truth is secondary to harmony. Truth is secondary to who calls the shots. This is more of a hierarchical society. You see it in the language, like Grenjai. There's a little bit of awe, a little bit of fear of people who are above you in the socio-economic class. That keeps people contained in a way that we don't have in the West.
Online, you always hear the expression, "Oh, you'll always be an outsider in Thailand as a Farang." What's the story, everybody? Hope you're doing well. Pete here from Thairish Times. My guest today has spent coming up to nearly 40 years in Thailand. His name is Christopher G. Moore. He's an author renowned for his crime fiction, particularly the Vincent Calvino series. And in this video, we're going to talk about life in Bangkok from the 1980s to now, how the expat scene has changed in Thailand from then until now. Then we're going to do a deep dive on Thai culture. We're going to talk about saving face. What's it all about? The power structures in Thai families as well, because it's very hierarchical. We're going to talk about how Thais handle criticism and then communication styles in Thailand compared to the West. And I suppose you could kind of think of this video as an exploration of Thai culture by a Westerner, me, while also making comparisons with Western culture as well. So it's a long one. We got a lot to get into in this video, folks. I hope you enjoy it. Leave me a comment down below what you thought about the video, and also I'm sure some of you watching this as well have your own observations about Thai culture, or you want to make a comment about what was said in the video. Put them down in the comment section, because I do like reading your comments, especially on a topic like this. Let's get straight into the video. Cheers. Chris, thanks very much for coming back on again.
Good to see you again, Pete. Welcome back to Thailand.
Thank you. It's been, I think, 3 years, we were saying just a second ago, since our last interviews. Loads of people really enjoyed the last ones we did, so back again to get some more info and stories off you.
I'm happy to be back and happy to offer a few observations about Thai culture and life and how they connect with my books.
So in the last video we spoke about your life in Thailand. You spent 37 years, I think, living in Thailand, and I want to just go back into some of that part of your life again. You know, you came in the 90s, Thailand, or the late 80s.
Late 80s, yeah.
And you lived all the way here, all the way through the 90s, and you've seen a lot of changes. I mean, Thailand has really, really changed from the late 80s to now. How has your life changed when you, like, from the late 80s and early 90s to the life you're living today?
I think my life has changed a lot, and I think most people's lives have changed. Our preoccupations, our methods of communication, our expectations have been reset. If you go back to the late 80s, kind of pre-internet, pre-social media, there was more of a reading culture than there would be today. That our attention span now is reduced, and that's worldwide, and it's true in Thailand as well. TikTok, for example, is very popular in Thailand as a kind of cultural form for shopping and gossip. Two very popular activities that people pay attention to.
Yeah, and I mean, even even when it comes to infrastructure here in Bangkok, you were here, was the BTS even built when you were here?
No, there was no BTS, there were no metered cabs. There was just a bus service. If you wanted to go somewhere across town, you either took a taxi and you negotiated the fare, or you took a bus. So I saw the transformation that came with opening up, particularly the suburbs of Bangkok. I mean, Bangkok is huge. It's 538 square kilometers, something like that. And so there are lots of remote neighborhoods, like Sukhumvit 101 would have been out in the boondocks when I arrived. And it's now connected to the BTS, so it's very accessible, easy to get to. So you have expat communities that have grown up on the periphery, or what seemed to be the periphery from the 1980s. It's no longer the periphery. There are vibrant communities of people living there with all kinds of amenities, from shopping to restaurants to entertainment.
How have the expats changed from, you know, the late 80s to 90s compared to now these days?
It's a good question. And clearly there have been changes. The 1980s was just kind of the start of mass tourism, particularly in Thailand and other places. It's not that people didn't travel, it's just that the kind of people who traveled in those days tend to be diplomats, NGOs, people who worked for the United Nations, people who were journalists, people who were adventurers, people who were ex-vets who somehow could not or would not want to return home. That was kind of the core group, and it was a small community. You tended to know someone who knew someone. Now it's a much larger, diverse population of expats who've come here, and often they come here for advancement of career or a place to maybe reduce their cost of living because they feel that Thailand is cheaper in terms of housing and food, etc.
I'd like to talk about Thai culture and integration. How has your understanding or appreciation of Thai culture like evolved over the years from like when you first came to where you are today?
Another good question, and I think it reminds me of an essay I read many years ago by someone named Isaac Berlin on hedgehogs and fox. A hedgehog knows one big thing, one unified idea, and everything feeds into that. The fox, on the other hand, is more flexible, adaptable, finds 100 ways to get into the chicken house rather than just the front door. So that adaptability is a real advantage when you go to another culture. I mean, one of the books in the trilogy, A Haunting Smile, as you know, has that ghost story behind it of Cortez and Montezuma. Again, a cultural clash historically dropped into the middle of a conflict in Thailand to show that in some ways we always have had these cultural conflicts. And in the West, the way it's played out is often through power and domination. It's not through understanding deeply how the elements of culture have assembled, because Thailand has different belief system from Ireland or from Canada or from England or any place else. And your belief system forms a core of the way you see reality. Now, where did your beliefs come from? They came from your parents, your siblings, your neighbors, your teachers, your friends, your colleagues. All of them contributed. It's just like inside of your mind, if you think there's like a large language model, and you draw upon that model when you're processing other people. You can't help it because that's all you know. You don't think I've been programmed, but you have. We all have. So the question is can you find a way to see your own programming and make adjustments? That's a key to me to be a successful expat, is you're able to be open to understand not only the other person's perspective, but by understanding that perspective, you understand your own perspective as just one amongst many ways of seeing an event. Take, for example, ghost. You ask a Thai, do they believe in ghost? And I've written about this before. They'll say, no, I don't believe in ghosts. And then the follow-up question is always, are you afraid of ghosts? Yes. So we have these kind of contradictions, and the way you get to know another person is to try to calibrate how their emotional range works, how it's been formed. And you only can do that by not just looking at the individual, but looking at that person in their family. What makes them fearful? What makes them happy? What makes them excited? What makes them suspicious is not some universal thing that we all tap into. It comes from our experience of living in a society with other people. So you have to learn, if you're going to be successful with those people, how that large language model came about in their mind. In the case of ghost, when we don't like something in the West, you know what we do? We call it superstition. But that just means it's a convenient way to reject another person's way of processing reality. So when you live in a place like Thailand and you understand the culture and you see the spirit houses, you ask yourself, what is this about? You have to be curious. You have to explore what inside the mind, the culture, historically and through custom and tradition, has motivated people to give offerings to spirit house, to monks, etc. Because that has shaped their identity. That's part of who they are. And when we meet other people, we want to know, who is that person really? Where do they draw their identity from? And you can only do that by going deeply into the culture. And the only way to get into the culture is through language. Because the Thais will communicate with one another, obviously in the Thai language, and it's full of jokes and puns and parodies on the language, on the tones, which is knockdown funny for someone who speaks Thai, but incomprehensible to someone who's trying to read the literal English translation, because jokes are very hard to translate because they depend on factors other than just a literal translation.
Yeah, they're very much linked to culture. I know in Ireland we've got lots of jokes that, you know, even if you're a native English speaker, you wouldn't get the punchline, you wouldn't,
Correct.
because we just have, you know, the Irish way or colloquialisms of how we actually, you know, say the joke. But we were talking off camera there about culture. I said to you that I lived 12 years in Thailand. I've been back in Ireland now working for the last 3 years, and it's only when I come back to Thailand that I really think it's like the culture is amplified. Everything is amplified, and I see Thailand and I see the culture in a way that I didn't see it when I lived here for 12 years. It's kind of like a reverse culture shock a little bit. But I did think I knew the culture, and it's dawned on me like how little I actually do know about Thai culture. I just think for foreigners it's very, very complex. Even the foreigners that can speak Thai, they still speak Thai, but because they haven't learned the culture, it's like they're translating, you know, the English language. It's hard to explain it, but I think what I'm trying to say is, to really know Thailand, you have to really know the culture.
Well, I mean, when you come to Thailand, and it's your first time here, and you haven't really studied Thailand, its history, its customs, its traditions, its language, which most people haven't, and I hadn't either when I first arrived here. So that was one of the first things I set out to do. And it was through writing that I was able to discover a lot, because when you write about something, you're required to focus and be coherent with a degree of clarity that will surprise you. When you try to write down something you think you know, and then you see it and you say, that's not really what I intended, because there's so much more in your brain that you have trouble translating into language. It's the tricks that our mind plays on how much we know about things around us. Like if I show you a 100 baht note now, and say, Pete, study this note for 1 minute, okay? And I'm gonna put it away. Here's a piece of paper, here's a pen, draw everything that you remember from that note on this paper. And suddenly you realize how little we pick up from that reality of a 100 baht note. We miss almost all of the detail. And what you look for are ways to allow you to increase your attention to the detail, because as they say, the devil is in the detail. And there's a reason for saying that, because the detail gives you the nuance of the person as opposed to a generalized abstract as to who that person is. For example, we're all familiar with a computer screen, right? We have all the icons, the Word icon, the PDF, Zoom, etc. So you click on an icon without ever thinking about what is the operating system behind that? Who programmed that? What were their biases? Where are they leading me? How are they collecting data? Every time I click on that, we don't tend to go through that process. And we don't tend to go through that process with people either. We look at their appearance, we hear what they say, but we treat them like we treat an icon on the screen. We don't look very deeply into what is the code behind that appearance. If we could read that code, we would know the person much better than just the superficial glance. It's like drawing the 100-baht note. We think we know from the appearance, but how much do we really know?
So Chris, I'd like to talk about something that you read it online often. I think about it often. I've made a mistake. I think a famous example I've spoken about on the channel was a couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago. I was a teacher in a school in Bangkok. Sukhumvit 22 actually was the school. Was down into the soy. Probably people would know it because I mentioned the soy. Anyway, a Thai teacher asked me to come and correct their work. They had created a test in English. They asked me to proofread it, so I did. I proofread it. There was a couple of mistakes in it. I highlighted those mistakes in red pen. Then I went into the office, in the Thai office in the school, and I handed back the paper with the mistakes to the Thai teacher. I left the office, and another Thai teacher came to me and said, "Oh, next time you shouldn't do that. You know, you should make sure you give the piece of paper to the teacher in private. Do it in private." He said you embarrassed the teacher in front of the other Thai teachers, and that teacher that I embarrassed didn't speak to me for about a week, and then I was able to clear the air eventually, but it was my first kind of issue with causing someone to lose face. Whereas if that was in Ireland, nobody would bat an eyelid, but over here it was different. Could you just explain what I did kind of wrong there?
I wouldn't call what you did was necessarily wrong. I mean, you would come from a culture where it would be someone's asked you for a critique, you give the critique, and so for you, you've actually given them a benefit. You've shown interest and attention in something that's important to them. You've given your time, which is the most valuable thing you can give to someone. And so suddenly you feel caught off guard, you know. Now, I'm a bad guy after I did this. It's not that you're a bad guy, it's just that, again, remember in Thailand, the individual is part of a group, and there's a group cohesiveness, and part of the bonding of the group is mutual reinforcement. It's not that you can't criticize within the group, but you do it in a very humble way with a lot of humor, and if you're going to do it in a group at all. And the best thing is just to avoid trying to criticize someone or someone's work in a group situation. And a group can just be one other person. You want to take a person aside and say, look, you've asked me to do this, and I don't know, I may not have done it in the most professional way, but I've done my best. So please forgive me if it's not up to what you wanted me to do, but I have tried to help you on this. And if you need any more help, please let me know. You do that with the individual, and to say, you know, I've marked this up, but don't think that somehow I'm being messy or trying to hurt anyone's feeling. I'm just trying to suggest that maybe this might improve it. You may disagree. So on individual to individual, that probably will not be a problem. It's just that if there's a group of people around and that group has an image of her and she has an image of being a member of that group, and suddenly someone comes in and says, it's a mistake here, this doesn't look quite right, and why would you say this, I would say that, that would be viewed not as helping, but why don't you like this teacher? Why are you attacking her? They don't look at the substance of what you've provided. They look at it as criticism within the group is an attack on a member of the group. Do you understand that? And we come from a culture where that is not an overriding issue. It is here. So it makes it more difficult, say for a manager or for anyone else dealing with Thai people in a group, to make certain that you spend the time to deliver a message in a way that is soft as opposed to hard, rational, logical. Because remember, the Thai language didn't go through the Renaissance. We separated 500 years ago logic, reason, and emotion. You take heart talk, the heart words, right? There's 750 phrases, all of them with heart at the root of that phrase. So everything is from the heart. It is far more entangled emotionally and rationally than we have in the West. I mean, we're entangled as well, but for the Thais having never had the break of a Renaissance, it's more of a shock for a Westerner coming from that tradition where logic rules, or at least it used to. We're becoming far more illogical and irrational as Western societies than we once were. So we can no longer sit on our high horse and talk about, the products of the Enlightenment taking us to a new level.
Do you think Thai people are emotional as a group? I've just kind of noticed recently, I wouldn't say that, they seem quite emotional. Like when you cause someone to lose face, sometimes I've experienced tears, like real emotion,
Sure.
Crying. I was at a table having dinner with a group of Thai people last week during Songkran, and there was a girl there. She was about 18, 19. She was with her parents, and I don't know what was said, but there was a slight disagreement over her mother criticized her for something small, the way she was eating or something really small, and there was a real emotion when she started crying at the table. Yeah. And I was like, oh wow, it's rare to see an 18, 19-year-old Irish woman cry because her mother criticized her in front of a group, and it just got me thinking, are Thai people more emotional than other nationalities?
I don't think so. I think it's not necessarily they're more emotional. I think it comes down to in a family. Let's say there's a woman that you're interested in, and maybe you want to date her, maybe you even want to marry her. What you need to figure out is, how does she deal as a child with the power structure in her family? Where's the power? Is it with the father? Is it the mother? What's the relationship between the two? Because that's what's being put down into memory. That's what's being accessed. So when you see something as trivial as, oh, why did you use that fork rather than the other fork kind of thing, it's not just about that fork. It's about a whole power structure of someone being reined in and feeling that they're being oppressed in front of other people in public, that makes them cry. Because if you feel you don't have control, if you feel powerless, the emotions come out. You feel despair, you feel sadness, you feel anger, all kinds of negative things, and they come from the same thing. You don't have personal autonomy in that situation. You're defenseless, because in that power structure, your mother is the authority. You have no choice.
I've noticed that even with women that are, and males and females that are same age as me, in their 30s,
right.
They go back home, and the power structures, the parents have the ultimate power, and what they say goes, and there is no kind of questioning the parents, and that is so opposite to my culture. I was raised with, mother and father. I would be able to criticize them, they criticize me. I see my friends, it's kind of the same way. If you're not happy, you'll speak up about it. Could be a disagreement, but the disagreement can be resolved, but there's lots of open communication. And I've found with the Thai family structure here that sometimes they won't address the elephant in the room. Everyone will just ignore it, and yeah, like there's much less open communication.
Part of what happens in a family or a group is truth is secondary to harmony. Truth is secondary to who calls the shots, who's in the power position. Even though they may be wrong, if you criticize them, you're not just criticizing a decision, you're criticizing their power, their authority. And this is more of a hierarchical society. You see it in the language, like Grenjai. There's a little bit of awe, a little bit of fear of people who are above you in the social economic class, education class, etc. And so that keeps people contained in a way that we don't have in the West, where in your family, it's a good example, in a lot of families, it's far more individualistic, is that the family feels they've succeeded if their son Pete is this independent agent in the world who's able to navigate without having to phone mother and asking for advice. Where in Thailand, the family is the source of obligation, it's the source of responsibility, it's the source of loyalty. And so once you understand that from the West, you understand that you either accept that as a given or you move on. Because you're not going to change a culture as old as this one or the people who have grown up with that cultural training. That's their level of obligation and responsibility are going to be set very early on. You're coming late to the game.
Yeah, there's the old saying, like if you're in a relationship with a Thai person, you know, you're second. The family, the mother and father come first on the totem pole. You're the second one.
Well, that's one way of putting it, but I think it's a Western way of putting it. The Thai way of putting it would be, and I'm not Thai, so I'm just assuming this would be the Thai way of putting it, is that, yes, Pete, you are a foreigner, but you're now part of the family. It's not we're being harsh on you. Every member of the family is subject to the same level of obligation and responsibility and loyalty. Some of them will let you down, and you're going to be disappointed in them, and you're going to talk about them, particularly behind their back, but it won't stop you from supporting the brother who's got a meth habit, who won't get a job, who's been in and out of jail.
Do you think if foreigners learn the language and immerse themselves in the culture, would they ever be accepted into Thai society? You always hear online, you always hear the expression, you'll always be an outsider in Thailand as a Farang.
I mean, it's a large generalization, and there's some truth in that, and there's some universal truth in that. It would be true, I went to university in England, and so I could understand the difference. It was my first example of the difference between an individual and a group. People behave differently in a group than they behave as an individual, but part of their identity is from the group. And in Thailand, the groups tend to be quite closed to outsiders. We tend to forget the importance of people who are native to a culture and a language and people who come to it later on. When you come to a culture later on, there's always going to be a little bit of hesitation. This person's Thai is perfect, but he's still an outsider. He hasn't had the LLM development from childhood where it becomes automatic. In other words, your reactions are not thought out, they're automatic reactions. You're going to get that in Ireland as well. There's going to be clubs in Ireland that no Englishman would ever be accepted in, even though he speaks the same language and has some of the same tumultuous history. There will be a certain kind of hesitation, and that's true around the world. So the Thai is no different than that. But you have to understand that when you come into a place like Thailand, which has a relatively, not completely homogeneous population, the group identity is very important. You know, they keep in contact with people that they were in school with, they were in university with, or in the military, in their company, in their political party. All of these kinds of things shape who they feel that they are inside, because their values and identity are reflected in the mirror of other people in that group. They don't want to disappoint them.
Here's one I have about life in Thailand. What's something about Thai life that surprised you or took you some time to get used to?
I think one of the things that's difficult for someone from the West to get used to is that we tend to be more direct and blunt in our assessment, and we're not shy in saying things that may be controversial or may be on one side of a conflict. Thailand really comes from a rice-growing culture where community and relying on other people required harmony for harvest. You didn't want to piss off someone by coming up with some outrageous idea of a god or of a way of treating people that would offend others in the group. Because if you did that, when it came time for harvest, they're not going to be there for you. So that one of the taboos here would be to say things that would be a source of conflict. The second you open up conflict, you are crossing an invisible line. This is really a society of politeness, of kindness. Now, under the surface, there may be conflict boiling up, but in terms of expressing that, it takes an extreme situation for a Thai to get pushed to the point where they want conflict, because they're conflict avoidance.
I have a good example of that, as you were saying. I can remember, so from this trip I went to a coffee shop with a group of Thai people, and one Thai person recommended the coffee shop. I had the coffee, I didn't like the coffee, and I said in front of the group,
sure,
I didn't like the coffee here.
Right.
And I saw everyone kind of got a little bit quiet, and I realized straight away, oh, I think I may have caused a bit of conflict.
Sure.
I was a bit too direct.
Sure.
Hurt the person's feelings who recommended the coffee shop.
Yeah.
But, you know, after living 3 years back in Ireland, that's no problem to be that direct. Nobody would care.
But here, that would be crossing an invisible line. For most foreigners would do the same kind of thing, because criticism, particularly from someone who's outside of the group, is viewed as kind of a hostile attack. It's not viewed as to the merits. Well, what was wrong with the coffee? Maybe I can make it better. Maybe it's the brand or the way it was brewed or whatever. It doesn't invite that level of discussion. It's viewed as something that, for whatever reason, this person doesn't like me. Criticism gets personalized very quickly in Thailand. And that's why one has to be very delicate about that. And the Thais are themselves. You find examples the opposite, but by and large in the culture, if you are critical of someone's action or behavior or beliefs, you go about it in an ambiguous way of making a joke, of softening the edges, because we come from a rationality society where rational, logical behavior and thought and conversation is just normal. So when you're in a place where that is not the norm, you have to be aware that you're bringing something into a situation which is not going to have the same kind of response that you would expect in Ireland or Canada or the US.
How do you learn it? Like, how do you learn the ways of not making these cultural mistakes? I mean, I would say that I'm a person, I'm quite aware, I'm an observant person. I observe the culture. I thought I understood Thai culture. I do understand it to a certain point. I wouldn't say I have a deep level, especially after living in the West for the last 3 years. But how would you, like, are there even classes that foreigners can go to, cultural assimilation classes, or?
Well, this is part of the reason I write books like The Cultural Detective. It's an exploration of how do you get in to try to understand something, which from the outside you don't understand because you were never programmed from birth to understand how relationships work in a family, how they work in a group. We just assume that our relationship instruction manual from growing up applies everywhere. Well, it doesn't. Even within the Thai culture, Thai people will make mistakes with other Thai people. An example, and I've written about this before, it was a very good friend of mine and a very successful business guy, lovely, lovely mother. And he had some foreigners he invited to his mother's house for tea. And so he arrives with his 2 or 3 friends, and the mother answers the door, and she sees the foreigners taking off their shoes. And she says, no, 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 you don't have to take off your shoes. It's okay. It's okay. I understand you're a foreigner and you come in to the house with your shoes on. That's totally understandable. And they said, no, 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 we do understand this is custom. He said, no, 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 I insist you don't put your shoes off your feet, keep them on and come into my house and enjoy my hospitality. So they went in, had tea, left. The next day, my friend gets a phone call from the mother. How dare you bring those rude foreigners to my house? But why were they rude, mother? They didn't take off their shoes. But I was there. You told them not once, but twice not to take off their shoes. She says, that's true. But they should have not listened to me. They should have known I was just being polite. So even amongst Thai people, there can be misunderstandings as to where the politeness is at an end. And you have to understand that the voice is coming from politeness, not from true wish fulfillment. They wish you to take off your shoes. They're being polite to telling you not to take off your shoes, but you are expected to read the mind that that is polite talk. It's not really what I want. That's what makes social relationships more difficult in other cultures, because what people say, it can be disconnected from what they want.
How about managing the Thai people? Like if you have a Western manager over in Bangkok or whatever, some other place in Thailand, and he has to manage a group of Thai people, I'd imagine in the workplace it would be a lot harder when there's goals and targets and performance measurements and goals to achieve.
Absolutely, because it's a different kind of mindset. The foreign boss will be treated with an enormous amount of respect because this is a respect culture, and Luk Nong, which are the employees, will why and smile and get coffee for the boss and treat the boss in a way that he's never been treated in Ireland or England or America or Canada, with that degree of deference. But to get the most out of them, the most creative bosses understand that there are a lot of non-boss rituals and customs and ways of being in the office that allow you to tap into who they really are and to get the best out of them. That takes a lot more work. It takes a lot more understanding. You cannot just go on the corporate culture that is imprinted on you as a boss from another country and come here and expect that that corporate culture, without any adaptation, is going to fit. So the first thing you do is coming as a manager is become a student again. And by becoming a student, you learn a humility that everything that you learned as a manager now has to be tested against a new reality.
Okay, let's move on to the characters and people that you've met over the years. Being in Thailand 37 years, and imagine in the last video you spoke about meeting Oliver Stone. Fascinating character, fascinating person. Have you met any other interesting people throughout the years that are worthy of a mention?
Yeah, I mean, I've met all kinds of from prime ministers to other writers to painters to authors, etc. So there is a certain kind of, I guess, cachet, because you can say, look, I met that famous writer, We had lunch a number of times or dinner a number of times, etc. But in the larger scale of things, it doesn't convey a lot of information other than kind of a bragging right or a vanity thing. You know, I met Gore Vidal, I met Michel Houellebecq, the French writer. I've met all kinds of people over the years, and as I say, poets and painters as well. So that you start to learn that Thailand is kind of a magnet for a lot of creative people, because one of the reasons I've been here for 37 years, this is one of the most creative places I've been. The Thais are highly creative. If you look at their films, you know, look at their literature, there is an ability, or just on the commercial side, look at the TV commercials that they make. Look at the videos that they make. I mean, they're absolutely world class. That's why so many films get made here, because you get really creative people who are members of a crew. You know, your gaffers, your editors, etc. First and second ADs, all these kinds of people are here in droves. And so you're able to tap into how creativity works in another culture. In other words, we come from a culture where, you know, going back to Ghost. When we think of Ghost, we think of a lot of things, but one of the things we may think about would be the movie Ghostbusters. We made a comedy about it, right? The comedy was to make fun, poke at what we believe to be the superstition about ghosts. And so we use our creativity to deconstruct. And the Thais will often use that creativity to reinforce, or sometimes to deconstruct as well. There are rebels in every society. You're going to have rebellious artists in Thailand like you're going to have in Ireland or any place else. And those voices do come up, and they do have influence, and they do make people think, but it's only part of the culture. So if you focus too much on that part of it, you're going to miss the overall culture, and most people are not in the creative arts.
Well, let's talk about your books, Chris. The Smile Trilogy, okay? So what inspired you to write Smile Trilogy?
I wrote the books to understand what I was experiencing as I was experiencing it. The first book, A Killing Smile, it was trying to understand the relationship between expats of different cultures, because we just assume it's a Fulong versus Thai, and often it's not, because someone from another part of Europe is going to have a different set of expectations and dreams and hopes and beliefs than you will have in Ireland, or I will have from Canada. So it's trying to understand other people from other countries, and then understanding the dominant culture in which you're living and how it absorbs or doesn't absorb certain of those practices and beliefs that we have. And so we find ourselves in reaction to something that we're not programmed to process in the way that we find Thais will process things. And so as a result, we fall back on, okay, well, that's not right, or that's stupid, or that's crazy. It just means we're not programmed to see things in that particular way. And we dismiss things too quickly because we don't look into what is behind that belief. Because if you understand a person's beliefs, you understand their values. If you understand their values, you understand what motivates them and what is their reward function. In other words, they're all looking for rewards, everyone is, but that comes from your values, which come from your beliefs. And so I wrote that first book, A Killing Smile, in 1991, as I was learning the language, as I was navigating Thai culture, and trying to understand the relationship, particularly the off-track underground nightlife relationship, which is the easiest one for a foreigner to get into. You don't have to worry about getting into a Thai group. You're immediately accepted in that kind of a subculture, culture of expats. And so when you look at A Killing Smile, you're looking at someone who was coming to grips with how expats who had lived here long term and not so long term had survived? How had they adapted? How had some of them not adapted? And what price did they pay? What was the relationship they had with Thai women? And how did that play out? Were those expectations reasonable from a Thai context, or were they projected from our home culture context? And we can't help but do the projection, because most of us have lived in a culture all of our lives, and things get challenged, but the overall culture is shared. And you come to a place where it's not shared widespread, you have to ask, how did that happen? What can I learn about this culture, and what does it teach me about my own culture? So Killing Smile was that kind of a project.
The protagonists in the trilogy are often unreliable, morally ambiguous. Was that intentional to create these type of protagonists?
I think it came from the reality of the experience of the time. There was a sense there's a sense of vertigo when you first come to a new culture, where things you are not the way you think they appear. Once you can no longer look at the appearance as reflecting the true reality, you start to question things as their reliability, their predictability of people. All of it goes down once you have that fundamental question. It goes back to Socrates, I know nothing. When you hit that point in another culture, you start to question, you start to see things are more ambiguous, they have nuance you didn't think about, they're far more complex. And it's not just the beautiful smile, it's what's behind the smile, and the kind of smile, and the context of the smile that shapes how you relate to that person.
The book was published, or the trilogy, they were published in the 90s.
They were. A Killing Smile 1992, Bewitching Smile 1993, and then Haunting Smile 1994.
How have the books aged in relation to 2025?
I think it's a fair question. I think my feedback from readers who read the books when they came out 30 years ago and now reread them today after 30 years of living in Thailand or knowing about Thailand, find new things that they didn't see the first time through. I mean, the best kind of books to read are the ones that you find new layers that you didn't see the first time through. So I think all three of the books are kind of a guide to how I, as an author, navigated my first few years in Thai culture, how I saw things, how I processed that reality, and how it reshaped my perception of how to deal with other people in this culture.
What kind of reader would the Smile Trilogy resonate with?
I think someone who wants to go beyond just mere entertainment, who would like a bit of a cultural exploration, a journey which allows them a better understanding of how the identity of Thai people is shaped overall. And there's going to be a lot of variations in that. It's not just cloning. No culture does that successfully, no matter how effective it is. So but you need the basic understanding of how their identity is shaped. And the three books are basically looking at that identification and our own identification from the West. I mean, as I say, in A Haunting Smile, I have the ghost of Cortez and Montezuma coming and in a sense poking fun at kind of cultural colonialism in Thailand through the point of view of people who've been dead for 500 years. Before it was done through war and conquest, and now it's done through business and capitalism and globalization. So you come here and you get the appearance that this is like any other big city. You got a KFC, you got McDonald's, you've got all of the consumer brands, you've got the shopping malls, the cinemas filled full of Western films, and as a result, and you talk with people who are totally fluent in English, you think, well, this is easy, you know. So you can be misled by the appearance, the way things are, but underneath there are fundamental differences that have shaped the psychic and the expectations of Thai people. And it's good to have exposure to them, and it's useful to read books by people who have gone through that process and shared how that exposure has shaped the characters and the context in which those characters find themselves. Because it's like our original learning, right? Our original learning comes from stories that we hear from our friends and our parents. Our parents and friends still tell us stories, but they probably don't tell us the story about Thai culture. We have to find another way to get that kind of story, that narrative that runs in the head of a Thai person before we can begin to understand them. Because once you understand that narrative, you can understand how you need to adjust your own expectations, what you need to change, because you have control over yourself and your mind. You don't have control over theirs, because they may not have gone through that similar process of having lived in another country, in another culture. I mean, there are a number of bicultural Thais who easily flip back and forth from Western to Thai culture. But I think that the original native large language model system that goes into everyone's head is always the background operating system.
Chris, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much for doing it. We'll do it again when I get back.
Yeah, we'll do it again. Don't wait 2 or 3 years, okay?
No, definitely. Maybe next year we'll get you again. You give real deep insights into Thai culture. I highly recommend your books. I've read them. I'll read more of them. Heart Talk is one of my favourites. It's on my bookshelf. Take it out every so often and look at the words, the Jai words, because it's very interesting stuff. I'll leave links to whatever books you want. You just share the links, and I'll leave the links down below for everyone to get them in the comment section and also the description box. Hope you enjoyed the video, folks. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next one.